Lego's decision to spotlight Paige Bueckers using college-themed products that don't match her current identity illustrates a major flaw in how brands are treating women's basketball. They're packaging athletes around vague feel-good themes rather than authentic performance. Instead of rooting campaigns in fan interest or sales data, companies chase buzz and superficial stories, banking on name recognition over substance. Paige's branding has become increasingly disconnected from audience demand, in stark contrast to Caitlin Clark, whose popularity is grounded in real market traction. The result? Flawed campaigns that fall flat with consumers and fail to justify their cost. This trend speaks to a broader crisis in how corporations approach the sport. By investing in athletes who don't deliver measurable results, brands like Nike and Lego are squandering opportunities to build sustainable engagement.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
The video lays out a stark reality. Data-driven marketing isn't just more effective, it's essential. With Caitlin Clark offering a blueprint for authentic, profitable promotion, the continued emphasis on narrative-first strategies not only wastes resources, but risks damaging the future of women's basketball as a viable. It started with a Suitcase, a flashy PR rollout, a giant campaign, and a Nike deal that was supposed to launch Paige Bueckers into the stratosphere. But what came next didn't break the internet. It barely moved the needle. The basketball world watched as brands poured millions into a player whose name trended more in boardrooms than on highlight reels. And while that Suitcase moment looked like the beginning of an era, it quickly unraveled into one giant marketing misfire. Paige's signing with Nike was supposed to signal a new wave of investment in women's sports. But the problem? The hype didn't match the metrics. Viewership didn't spike. Merchandise didn't sell out. And the buzz didn't convert to engagement. Yet the money kept flowing. Campaigns kept rolling. Somewhere between the press photos and the rollout kits, the actual audience, real fans, were left wondering who these ads were even for. Nike banked on Paige Bueckers being the face of a movement. Instead, they got lukewarm reactions and half-hearted traction. Social media engagement told a different story than the press releases. Fans weren't rallying. Sales weren't climbing. This wasn't a case of slow growth. It was a disconnect between corporate fantasy and consumer reality. And the problem wasn't just with Nike. Other brands followed the same pattern. Paige was featured in campaigns that pushed vague empowerment messages, slapped her name on products that didn't resonate, and color palettes that reference her college roots more than her current identity. The branding was inconsistent. Worse, it was irrelevant. Instead of elevating her career, these campaigns exposed just how little thought had gone into who the actual customer was. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark was doing what no marketing department could manufacture, changing the game in real time. Her impact on the court translated instantly into numbers, record-breaking viewership, merchandise flying off shelves, and packed stadiums. While companies scrambled to ride the narrative of rising stars, Caitlin was already a proven market force. The numbers didn't lie. Brands that partnered with Clark weren't just chasing buzz. They were capitalizing on proven ROI. Every game she played was a headline. Every appearance moved units. Her visibility wasn't a PR stunt. It was earned, and audiences responded to that authenticity. That's what makes the contrast between her and Paige so sharp. Caitlin's success wasn't the result of perfectly curated branding. It was the outcome of undeniable performance. Her dominance in the league drew viewers in, and brands that aligned with her found themselves swept up in that momentum. While Paige's campaigns leaned heavily on aesthetics and storytelling, Caitlin's appeal was built on something more sustainable: results. What stood out most was how organic it all felt. Caitlin didn't need gimmicks. She didn't need an artificial storyline. The consumer interest was already there. Every shot, every stat, every sold-out arena was proof that this wasn't about hype. It was about alignment. Real performance meeting real demand. And when Caitlin did speak, when she stepped into the spotlight outside the court, she didn't lean on buzzwords or overproduced narratives. She talked about the game. about her team, about winning. That focus resonated in a way that marketing copy never could. Fans saw her as someone who wasn't just playing the part of a star, she was living it. In contrast, the scripted nature of Paige's rollout felt staged. Brands were crafting a storyline for her rather than building one with her. That top-down approach made it harder for audiences to connect. You can't force market traction through aesthetics. And consumers know when something's being sold to them rather than shared with them. As the buzz around Caitlyn continued to grow, so did the questions around Paige's positioning. The energy surrounding her brand started to feel more like a holdover from strategy that hadn't been adjusted since college. While Clark's fan base expanded, Bueckers became a case study in what happens when corporate narratives refuse to pivot. There were moments where it felt like the marketing world was more invested in the idea of Paige than in Paige herself. Instead of analyzing performance, they stuck to old scripts. That rigidity led to disappointment, not because of Paige's talent, but because expectations were set by marketing, not metrics. The gap between perception and performance grew wider. Caitlyn Clark's jersey sales told the story loud and clear. They didn't just top the charts, they dominated them. Her Fever jersey became one of the most visible items in all of sports merchandising, cutting across fan bases and markets. It wasn't just about basketball. It was about cultural presence. And that presence wasn't something that could be replicated by simply putting another athlete into a similar format. You can't copy-paste success. You can't assign virality. Brands who tried to mimic Clark's impact with other players found themselves facing muted launches and limited interest. The market had already... In press conferences, Caitlyn's impact extended beyond stats. She brought composure, awareness, and a tone that matched the professionalism expected at the highest level. Media engagement wasn't a chore, it was part of her brand. And it worked because it wasn't manufactured. The trust she earned with fans translated directly into trust from brands. That trust matters, because when brands ignore it, they don't just risk wasting money, they risk losing credibility. Companies that double down on mismatched campaigns and underwhelming endorsements aren't just misreading the room. They're rewriting the script while the audience is already watching a different. Paige Bueckers never asked to be the face of a marketing misfire, but that's exactly where she ended up. Instead of being allowed to develop at her own pace, she was turned into a brand ambassador before her audience even got a chance to connect with her organically. That kind of top-heavy promotion builds pressure, not passion. The product launches, the photo ops, the hype, none of it matched what was happening on the court. And that's not a knock on her skill. It's a reflection of how little these brand campaigns understood the timing and temperature of the market. They were trying to bottle lightning that hadn't struck yet. At every turn, Paige was rolled out as if she were already the main character in a league she hadn't even fully stepped into. It wasn't about letting her game speak. It was about making her a spokesperson for narratives she hadn't authored. And when fans didn't respond the way the brands expected, instead of adjusting, they doubled down. This is where the disconnect became undeniable. Campaigns were polished, hashtags were trendy, and the visuals were on point, but engagement was flat. The response wasn't hate, it was indifference. That's the worst-case scenario in marketing. A campaign so glossy, it slides right past people. On the other side, Caitlyn Clark didn't need to be repackaged. She brought the numbers, the energy, and the market interest without a brand's permission. Her highlight reels went viral because fans cared. Her games trended because people were watching in real time, not just reacting to polished content after the fact. While Paige was being marketed to fans, Caitlyn was building with them. That distinction made all the difference. The momentum was already there. All brands had to do was catch up. And the ones that did, they saw the kind of impact Nike had hoped for, but never got with Paige. Caitlyn Clark didn't just take shots on the court. She was a shot in the arm for women's basketball. From ESPN broadcasts to merch drops, her presence meant movement. Retailers didn't need to be convinced to carry her jersey. Networks didn't need to be persuaded to feature her games. She was the pull. There's a reason her name keeps topping charts. It's not because of ad dollars. It's because of performance. Her three-pointers didn't just light up the scoreboard. They lit up Twitter, TikTok, and fan group chats. That's real value, and you can't manufacture it with a suitcase or a press kit. When Caitlyn spoke to reporters, she brought clarity, not kin lines. Her answers weren't crafted by PR firms, and that authenticity landed. Fans want athletes who feel real, not ones trapped in a story arc developed in a boardroom. She understood her role as a professional and a public figure, but she didn't perform for the cameras. That balance is rare, and it's why brands who tapped into it reaped the benefits. Because marketing isn't just about promotion, it's about trust. And fans trusted her. They believed in her journey, her voice, her grit. That made every endorsement feel like a collaboration, not a sales pitch. What's striking is how quickly the corporate world will abandon that authenticity if it doesn't fit the aesthetic they're chasing. Paige was made into something fans weren't ready for, and when it didn't work, she was left holding the bag. The problem wasn't Paige, it was how brands try to frame her. That kind of setup guarantees disappointment. It's not just ineffective, it's unfair. You can't force a breakthrough. You have to let it happen. Fans can spot the difference between a player rising naturally and one being fast-tracked for headlines they haven't earned yet. Caitlyn's Indiana Fever jersey didn't need a campaign. It became a symbol. You saw it everywhere. And not because someone told people to care, but because they already did. Her value wasn't in the branding. It was in the buy-in. That's what made her such a powerful asset. Not just for her team, but for the entire league. There's a lesson in that jersey. It's not about who a player is supposed to represent. It's about who they actually reach. Clark connected. Her presence in a jersey wasn't just a fashion choice. It was a statement of support, excitement, and shared belief. You can't fake. Corporate strategies tend to treat press conferences like theater. But Caitlyn's felt more like conversations. That's why fans kept tuning in. They weren't just watching a player. They were listening to a leader. Someone whose words carried weight because her actions already had. In contrast, the same couldn't be said for the campaigns that tried to mold Paige into something she hadn't become yet. Instead of responding to her real story, companies tried to build one around her, and it flopped. Because narratives without foundation always collapse under. Paige Bueckers was put in an impossible position. The marketing machine chose her, not because of timing or fan demand, but because of a corporate checklist. Her face was everywhere, except where it needed to be. In meaningful conversations, on trending plays, in the center of viral fan moments. Instead, she became a symbol of how far off target these branding efforts had drifted. No athlete should be expected to carry a campaign before they've even had the space to define their own story. But that's what happened. She was branded before she had even built. And fans knew it. They didn't reject her. They just weren't ready to buy into something that wasn't grounded in reality. The disconnect was sharp. The more brands tried to push, the more obvious the gap became. A highlight reel full of generic photos, stage product placements, and clean sneakers wasn't enough to convince the audience that this was the future they'd been waiting for. Not when the metrics weren't backing it up. Not when the courtside seats were still open. It wasn't that people didn't care about Paige. It was that they were being asked to care for the wrong reasons. She had potential, sure, but potential isn't currency if you spend it too early. That's what these companies did. They invested in an outcome that hadn't materialized yet, then panicked when the receipts came in blank. Meanwhile, Caitlyn Clark was breaking records without a megaphone in hand. She didn't need someone telling the world she was special. The world already knew. Every stat, every full arena, every sold-out game was undeniable. She wasn't manufacture hype. She was the market. Brands didn't have to craft a story for Caitlyn because she was already writing one, loudly. And when they finally jumped in, the success was immediate. Engagement exploded, merchandise sold out, and the fans showed up again and again. Because they wanted to, because they already believed. There's a difference between building a brand around a player and using a player to justify a brand's agenda. Paige got the latter. Caitlyn got the former. That's why it worked. Every time Clark stepped on the court, it reinforced the narrative, not contradicted it. Fans were part of the journey, not just the audience. When a player becomes a walking highlight reel, Fans don't need a logo to tell them what matters. They're already watching. They're already tweeting. They're already buying in. That's where marketing thrives, when it supports, not supplants. Clark's numbers weren't engineered. They were earned. And when Caitlin spoke off the court, her voice matched the moment. She was focused, articulate, and driven. No fluff. No vague slogans. Just confidence backed by performance. Her media presence felt like a continuation of her game, not a scripted deviation from it. That's why fans stuck around. Because what they saw in interviews was what they saw on the court. Real investment, real fire. Not performance for the sake of optics, but focus that translated across platforms. She didn't need help looking the part. She was the part. The sad irony is that none of this had to happen the way it did. If brands had just listened to the fans, to the data, to the game, they wouldn't be in this mess. Paige was talented, marketable, and charismatic, but she was handed a role written by people who didn't understand the timing. That mismatch didn't just undercut her. It made people question the entire approach. Why was so much attention being given to an athlete whose presence wasn't moving the numbers? Why was the spotlight fixed on a narrative instead of performance? The answer, unfortunately, had nothing to do with sport and everything to do with strategy. Clark's jersey sales were the loudest response possible to that flawed strategy. Fans weren't interested in forced campaigns. They wanted to be part of something real. And that's what Clark gave them, a player whose achievements created their own hype. The Fever jersey became a badge, not a product. Every brand that aligned with her capitalized not just on momentum, but on legitimacy. That's what made the difference. And it's why her campaigns felt like celebrations, not announcements. Because they were reflecting reality, not trying to invent it. There's no gimmick in Caitlin's post-game pressers weren't just quotable. They were meaningful. She didn't dance around narratives. She addressed wins, losses, team dynamics, all with poise. And that gave fans another layer to connect with. She wasn't just an athlete. She was a figure you could follow. That kind of presence isn't easy to replicate. It's not about looks, language, or legacy. It's about relevance. And that's what so many campaigns miss. They keep trying to manufacture a moment when the audience is already chasing a different one. That's how money gets. Paige Bueckers didn't fail the marketing machine. The marketing machine failed her. It handed her a spotlight before she had a real stage. She became the centerpiece of campaigns designed by people who didn't seem to care if the audience was even watching. And when the results didn't match the hype, the silence was louder than any press release. Her rollout wasn't just premature, it was tone-deaf. It ignored every warning sign, every data point, every consumer reaction. It was a case study in what happens when brands chase a narrative instead of listening to the market. And Paige got caught in the crossfire, expected to carry the weight of an idea that wasn't rooted in reality. By the time fans had a chance to actually see her play, they'd already seen the billboards, the press kits, and the branded content. But what was missing was momentum. There's no shortcut to that. You can't advertise your way into relevance. You have to earn it on the court, night after night. That's the difference. The most damning part wasn't the backlash. It was the apathy. The campaigns didn't spark conversation. They sparked confusion. People weren't rejecting Paige. They just didn't feel invited into a story that made sense. The hype machine had left the actual narrative behind. Caitlin Clark's story, in contrast, wasn't created in a studio. It was unfolding in real time. She brought fans along for the ride. Game by game, stat by stat. She didn't need a fictional origin story or a corporate rollout. She had something better, results. And brands that recognized that didn't just benefit, they thrived. Because that's the thing about real momentum. It doesn't need a megaphone. It amplifies itself. Every buzzer beater, every sold-out arena, every interview that felt honest instead of rehearsed. Caitlin didn't chase the spotlight. The spotlight chased her. You don't have to convince people to care when the product speaks for itself. Caitlin Clark didn't need a rebrand or a reposition. She just needed a camera and a crowd. And the world showed up, not because of a sponsorship deal, but because they didn't want to miss what she was about to do next. Her every move was a moment. And that's why she made such a powerful impact, because it felt personal. Fans saw themselves in her drive, her fire, her focus. That's how loyalty is built, not through slogans, but through shared experience. It was a connection, not a campaign. Brands looking for a blueprint need to start here. Start with the athlete. Start with the truth. Caitlin's media presence wasn't curated by a think tank. It reflected who she was. Focused, grounded, hungry. And fans connected with that more than they ever could with a flashy promo shot of Suitcase. She didn't need to pretend. She didn't need to perform. She just showed up and delivered, over and over. That consistency is what made her rise undeniable. And that's what brands can't fake, no matter how much they spend. Authenticity moves markets. Period. The unfortunate part is that none of this is new. We've seen this before. Big corporations latch onto the next big thing, burn through millions trying to force it, and then act shocked when it doesn't stick. The cycle repeats, and athletes pay the price. Meanwhile, the ones who actually are moving the needle get told to wait their turn. Paige Bueckers wasn't the problem. The way she was used was. She was given a marketing arc before she had a legacy to support it. And the fallout wasn't just missed sales, it was missed opportunity. Because had the timing been right, the impact could have been real. Caitlin Clark didn't skip any steps. She earned every headline. And her jersey sales weren't just strong, they were historic. That kind of demand only comes from authentic connection. It's not about getting the colors right. It's about getting the moment right. And she owned the moment. Every court she stepped on turned into a stage. Every city she visited lit up. She didn't need a campaign manager. She needed space to lead, and she took it. That's how stars are made. That's how movements start. And the brands that recognized it early are still cashing it. So here we are. One athlete marketed into oblivion. Another rising off pure performance. The lesson couldn't be clearer. If you want to build something that lasts, start with what matters. The game, the audience, the actual product. Not the story you wish people cared about. Because fans are smarter than ever. They know when something's real. And they know when it's forced. Paige deserved better. Caitlin delivered more. And brands? They've got a choice. Keep chasing optics or finally follow the data. Only one of those strategies actually works. If you're watching this and shaking your head at how badly this was handled, you're not alone. Let me know what you think in the comments. Should brands slow down and listen before they leap? Or are they too caught up in their own storylines to even notice? Don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who needs to see how not to run a campaign, and subscribe for more breakdowns of sports drama, brand chaos, and the moments that actually matter.